mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episode 6 of FX's limited series, Under the Banner of Heaven, entitled Revelation. Every week, I get here and I go, I feel like this episode was better than the last one, and each episode is better than the previous one. And they keep managing to prove me right by each episode being better than the last one. And I think that still applies here. This episode was a great episode, even better than last week's great episode. And I think for me this week is because that title Revelation, they do so much with that in this episode. I feel like we get revelations from a couple of characters. Jeb has revelations. Ron has revelations. But I also think that we as an audience are meant to have a revelation as well. Now, I've already kind of lived in this space in my own personal life anyway. But I love how the show brought us to this point. And maybe some of you watching this or watching the show have arrived at this revelation sooner. So I'm not saying like this is the point at which you are meant to arrive here. But because our characters arrive here at this point, I think that's why the audience is meant to arrive here as well. You may have arrived here earlier, but I want to start by talking about the revelations that I think we are meant to have arrived at this point in the show. And then I'm going to talk about Jeb and I'm going to talk about Ron. So I think the central premise of this episode, and really the show on a larger scale, is really just about how man has manipulated God and religious text or whatever, and to use the word and voice of God to essentially subjugate women and to serve their own purposes and desires. You know, it really all seems to be about sex to me. And that's interesting because no one has explicitly made that point in the show. They made the point about the misogyny, the male dominant aspect of this religion. But really, it just seems to boil down to sex. Because when you really think about it, what's been there, you know, I'm sure there are a number of fundamentalist views that are frowned down upon by present day Mormons. But what's been the focus of this show, I should say? Polygamy. It seems like they want to just use whatever text they can find that they can loosely tie into their religion. There's a ton of mental gymnastics that are done here to tie the word of God to their ability and desire to fuck as many women as possible. And they could call it wives, whatever, but it's all done in this manipulative way to make women feel like they have to answer to men because men are the only ones with a direct line to God. And it just so happens God is overly concerned with where their dicks go. So it just so happens that God wants them to have multiple wives. Because of course, if you call it a wife, you could put it under the banner. You could put it under a banner of marriage, which feels a little bit more religious, okay with religion, I should say, okay with God. Like, it's okay for me to have sex with this woman because she's my wife. But then you just so happen to have multiple wives. So you just get to have sex with multiple women. And it really all seems to boil down to that. Like, I love that I'm going to talk about it later, but I love how the scene when Ron is in the hot tub with these women and this, I got his name in here, John, whatever guy. When I get to this scene, I'll say whatever his name is. But he goes something like, I think he says like, I've been dreaming of this forever. Something like, this is what peace feels like or something. I'm like, this is what peace feels like, a whole bunch of fucking, like, yeah, I bet it does. He even says like, I bet Diana would love it here when she sees all this peace. I bet you she wouldn't, bro. I bet you she would not love it. But yeah, you know, it's a entire religion that's built on the man being in control, right? He's the one who speaks to God. So if he tells you that God said it, then you have to listen because he's talking to God. And guess what? God wants his dick well taken care of and to have many options. So, hey, he said it. You got to listen. And these women get in a position where they're like, oh, well, God said that it's okay for you to have multiple wives. Okay, and I guess that's fine. And then now you end up in situations where these women are so subjugated and so brainwashed that they do things that keep themselves in that position. Jeb even kind of says directly that the religion is doing, he says something like, he questioned Brigham Young's motivation. He's like, he even said, I can't remember how he worded it, but it was something to the effect of like, man, was Brigham Young's entire motivation all this time to get laid? Like, he didn't say that, but he even openly raises that question just in a much better way with nicer words. But where was I? Oh yeah, so Alan starts to move in a bit of a more fundamentalist-y type direction, right? He apparently is not taking his daughter to the doctor even though she's sick. He slaps Brenda. She wants a divorce, and she talks to her own sister, and her sister is like, yo, you should take this to the church instead of leaving. And like, that's just how subjugated they are. We have yet another instance of an abused woman seeking out help and being told to go, not only to go back to her abuser or stay with her abuser, but to become a better wife. Like, you must be fucking up, so you go be better and get yourself taken care of. Her own fucking sister tells her to go to the church first. And I'm not gonna jump ahead. I'll get there in a moment. But we saw the same thing with Diana when she talked to the Lows, and now we see it with Brenda talking to her sister. And it's like I said, it's wild that the subjugation is so heavy here that women subconsciously allow themselves to stay in these terrible situations. And Brenda goes to the church. She listens because, again, Brenda's brainwashed too. She's just not brainwashed by the fundamentalist aspect, but she's brainwashed by the traditional aspects that tell her that she's supposed to be a better wife and stick with her man, even in these shitty situations. And she goes to ask for advice. Well, not ask for advice. Well, she asked for permission for a divorce after Alan leaves the room in a huff. And they disguising their advice as prayer. I'm gonna just call them priests. I don't know how the hierarchy is in Mormonism, but whoever these guys are, they disguise their advice as prayer, but then essentially tell her, like, we don't give you permission to leave your husband, and you need to figure this shit out with the other Laffertys. And like, it's amazing. It's amazing the way all of this works together to keep the men in power, keep the women subjugated, and to then further their own personal desires by manipulating whatever slightly religious text they can get their hands on and loosely tie to their present day beliefs. So Brenda is so subjugated herself by the regular fucking religion that she buys this shit. She sends Diana away to be safe, but looks at it as her mission, her goal, her destiny to fix this shit with the Laffertys instead of bailing. Like, she's like, oh, I gotta add to that. I gotta fix this. And then to add to this colossal clusterfuck of subjugation, it's the word of the day here, subjugation. Dan and Ron find out what Brenda did or attempted to do, and they send Matilda of all people to threaten her life, and not a thinly veiled threat, a very much a keep fucking around, you gonna be dead threat. Like, it's wild. But this, I think, is a good place to kind of segue into Jeb's revelation, which is his crisis of faith. And I think he sees a lot of himself in Alan. Alan says, actually, I don't necessarily think it's Jeb sees himself in Alan. I think he sees his own situation in Alan's situation. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. So Alan felt like once he started to move away from Mormon beliefs, that would chase Brenda away. And I think Jeb is in that same situation. He's been moving toward this crisis of faith for all of these episodes up to this point, and he's there now. And I think he's upset by the fact that he knows his wife is just as equally just immersed in this shit as Brenda was, and that he could lose his family too. And, Alan says to Jeb, I bet you despise me. And Jeb says no. And I put in my notes, yeah, he said no because he sees himself in the same fucking situation. And I don't know, the idea of losing his family is very real to him right now. And I think that's probably why he's so emotional at the end. But I'll talk about that scene in a moment. But I think for us who are not, let's say for who are not in the Mormon religion or even very knowledgeable about it, it's easy to look at the Laffertys as like a one-off. Like, okay, just these brothers and these handful of fundamentalists, like they're the extremists, right? Like, oh, it's just them. Regular Mormonism ain't got shit to do with this. They just are doing the most with it, you know, like it's not it's a few bad apples. That's what I was looking for. A few bad apples. And I think that's where Jeb starts at the start of this show. But like, I think now he's in a place where he understands that traditional Mormonism, I'm not even gonna say traditional Mormonism, but whatever his people, his family, the people in that town believe in at that time, whatever they believe that to be, Jeb sees that as so rooted in misogyny that it allows this these fundamentalist viewpoints to persist. Like none of this would have worked out if the women who were not part of who didn't have the fundamentalist beliefs also didn't share this subjugated view of women. Because it like at any point, Diana could have left, Brenda could have left, but they're being advised, not even by men, but by other women, to stay in these situations and to put the burden on them to change who they are and to improve and to be better for these men. And this is where I think Jeb is really finally starting to lose it. When I say lose it, I mean his faith in this religion. Once he's understanding this and is seeing this dynamic at play in his own household. And, you know, people keep telling these women to go to the church for help, and the church is serving it's serving that same purpose. I don't know if it's intentional. I don't know if it's, you know, if they're in cahoots with the Laffertys or if it's just how men in this religion feel. But like, the men are just going to put you in a position to remain dominated. Like, they're not going to help you. Their help is going to be, let's pray, but make sure that you stay subservient. Like, we'll figure that out. And I just think Jeb reading about Brenda essentially allowing everything to kind of still play out because she's so firm in the belief that it's her destiny to fix things. I think that even aids him in moving in the direction that he's at by the end of the episode. You know, we see a scene where I can't remember what it was called, but this blessing or whatever that he does over his mother in the bathtub, that's tied to, again, the idea that men as these priesthood holders have a special connection with God so that they can provide this special kind of blessing. And then he tells Taba that he faked it just so he could rinse her hair. And then he says it was amazing how easy it was. And again, this all ties into this idea of how easily these men use and manipulate the quote unquote word of God to serve their own purposes. And in that moment, Jeb wanted to serve his own purpose of just like, yo, I just want to wash her hair. I just want to rinse this fucking shampoo out. Let me just slide through, give her this fake blessing so I can use it to rinse her hair out. And he's like, yo, that was easy for me to use God to serve my own purposes. And then he can now look at that and go, what the fuck? Like, this is just that's why it scared him how easy it was. Like, this is what they're doing, just on a much larger and more problematic scale. And I love that scene in that revelation where he says that to Taba. It's a short scene in the car, but it hits heavy when you understand what he's getting at. And I also love, speaking of Jeb, like Andrew Garfield's performance. You know, I said last week that he wears it all on he's been wearing it on his face as the season progresses, this increasing frustration. This week, he don't even it's outward. Like, it's not even just like, oh, his face, he looks frustrated. He's fucking pissed at this point. Like, he's not sure. Like, you remember at the beginning, whenever he would interview somebody, it would be a very, hi, brother. It's me, Brother Pyrie. I just wanted to talk to you about that. Like, it was a very kind, he was still very sweet. And crazy, his wife calls him sweet father at the end. Like, man, it's crazy how well this show was written at times. But, you know, he's such a sweet, kind guy at the beginning, even when he's interviewing people. And now, here in episode 6, the second to last one, he's up in the Lafferty's mom's house like, yeah, what I really mean is that Ron let your husband die by failing to provide adequate care. What you think about that? Like, he just put the shit right out there. Then he takes Bernard Brady, into the basement and, like, harshly confronts him about co-signing the mom saying that it was that they were loving boys, and he's like, "Why you scared of her? You scared of who she might tell?" Like he goes in on him as well. He's like not sugarcoating anything anymore. And I just want you guys to think when I talk about what this case has done to Jeb and how it's made him question himself and his faith and everything he's ever believed in. Just think about episode 1 interviews versus that interview with the mother and the nature of how Jeb was. Like when the mother asked Bill to leave, because Bill's like, okay, I'm gonna come in and play bad cop, and he's just saying all the real shit. She's dropping some casual racism like Salt Bae right on the right on the fucking conversation, dropping some casual racism like, oh, I know your brown ass cool with it, like whatever she said. And she turns to Jeb and is like, yo, get this dude out of here. And Jeb's like, he has the legal right to be here. She's like, well, is that the highest law you obey or some shit like that? I'm like, God didn't tell Jeb to get Bill out of here. You did. Who the fuck do you think you are? Like, and Jeb's just sitting there like, yeah, I don't give a fuck. Like, he don't care. Like, I feel like you say that to Jeb in episode 1, he's going to feel a way or do something. Jeb's just standing there like, I don't give a fuck about what you talking about. He's going to interview you however he wants. I'm going to sit here and watch, and I'm going to continue to not give a fuck. And I just love the progression of Jeb's character and where and how Garfield has taken him. And this kind of leads me into the final scene. Where am I at? 16 minutes? Oh, that's not bad. It's this final scene where Jeb is reading in the car this book about Mormonism, and I looked it up. It's like it's like a retelling or description of Mormonism, but from a critical viewpoint. And so it's not just like a Mormon Bible or something like that. It's a book that's openly truthful and honest about the Mormon religion. And we see Jeb reading this book, and he's crying. And every page he turns, and he's looking worse. And his wife gets to the car, and she scares him when she gets in. And he tells her, he says, I think I'm, what did he say? I think I'm, he said, I'm struggling. And this is the same scenario that Brenda is in. And I'm waiting to see, like they pray, all this, and I'm waiting to see where Jeb's wife is going to go with this. And Jeb says, yeah, we can pray. He starts to pray, and then my interpretation of that prayer was like he couldn't even finish. Like he started to pray. He said, like, I thank thee, were the last word he said. He was like, yeah, you know what? I ain't thanking this motherfucker. He's like, I don't thank you for shit. Nothing is going well for me right now. I don't even believe you are even decent. Like what? Like I don't believe in none of this Mormonism shit. Like and he couldn't even finish the. I don't think he has any disdain toward God, but it's to him. I think it's a heavy irony to be sitting there praying when he don't even believe in this religion anymore. And he can't finish, and the wife leans in and says she loves him, but she can't go through the struggle with him. And she asked him to share his testimony in front of the congregation so that everybody, including their daughters, can see her sweet father still believes. Now, for one, the fact that he has daughters, I think even compounds his frustration with all of this, because it's a very misogynistic religion to him. At this point, he's making this realization, he's having this revelation that this is a very misogynistic religion. And he's like, I'm going to bring my daughters up in this shit? You know, like you had the baptism thing from earlier in the season. We have this, how the misogyny and the subjugation has helped to help maintain this and to help make these events happen. And he's going to bring his daughters up in this? Like another thing that I think is great about this show, the little things here. But she said, I think her saying, and this is how I took this scene, her saying that she wants him to deliver his testimony in front of the congregation, and then ends it with, so they can see that their father still believes. I think she's looking at it as like, you're struggling right now. I'm gonna let you go through that. And once you arrive back here in the place you're supposed to be, where you're in with this religion, you can then go and deliver your testimony in front of the congregation. Like essentially she's saying like, she's not saying like, okay, let's have a conversation about how you're struggling with your faith, or let's have, she's not being open to it. She's kind of just like, okay, I'm going to let you have your struggle, but you are going to end up back where you need to be at. And then I need you to get up in front of everybody and say that. And I think that is part of what made him break down, because he overcries like when she leaves the car. And I get it, because he already was carrying the weight of possibly losing his family. Well, okay, well, there's the weight of the case, but then there's also the weight of losing the family, losing everything that he believed in, like questioning everything he believed in, who he is, all of that, questioning whether or not he'd be able to keep his family or his wife or whatever once he said that, because he knows the nature of how this goes. He's seen it. Anytime somebody try to get a divorce, they're like, no, back to the church. and now he's faced with the reality of his wife being just like Brenda. Like nope, I'm going to stay because this needs to be fixed. Even though I'm seeing all the fucked up things going on, like, I'm still in this faith because she's just as brainwashed as everyone else. And I think that's why his cry is so hard at the end, because like that was the exclamation point, was his wife essentially saying, like, assuming like this is just a temporary situation. So once you got your shit figured out, get in front of the church and tell everybody how you struggled, but how God brought you back. And there's no conversation that happens here. There's no back and forth. There's just Jeb saying, I don't know if I'm in on this religious shit anymore, and her patting him on the head like, okay, but once you get back where you need to be at, everything will be fine. Like, that revelation, I think, for him is what broke him in that moment. I thought that was just a wonderful performance by Andrew Garfield in that crying in that car. Wonderful. So 21 minutes, this is going a little bit faster than I thought. So I'm going to talk about Ron and then have a couple of thoughts at the end. So Ron's revelation is basically his acceptance of being the one. And I love this term, the one. We have the episodes that the one mighty and strong, or whoever, that refers to this same person that they now believe Ron to be, and that now Ron believes himself to be. I love the terminology of the one. Like, they even say it. Like, I think Onaya says a thing. Ron, you are the one. I'm like, this is the fucking Matrix. Like, come on. But Ron goes to meet with this guy, John Bryant. That's what his name was, in Oregon. And this was some extra hippie shit. A bunch of women walking around, being very flirty, drinking wine, all this kind of shit. And Ron is kind of into it at first, but he's not that into the idea of drinking the wine. Then he's in a hot tub with John Bryant, what I think was like 3-4 presumably naked women. And he's just like, oh, this is great. Diana would love it here, which, like I said, no, she wouldn't. But John asked to baptize Ron. And immediately I'm getting vibes here. I'm like, I feel like this is going to either turn into an orgy, or like, I feel like one of a few things is going to happen. Ron is going to have sex with these women. Ron is going to have sex with these women and John. Ron is going to have sex with John. Either way, some sort of fucking is going to happen in this hot tub. And I wasn't quite right about that. But when John when John asks if he can baptize Ron, I put in my notes like, oh shit, John's about to baptize Ron and Dick. And I'm putting it in jokingly because, like I said, I thought there was some sex was going to happen. But then sure enough, they start kissing after the baptism. And I think that was, a bridge too far for a guy who is so deeply involved in a misogynistic religion that is focused on as many women as possible, which makes it sound like an overly masculine kind of religion. I would assume that there's also a lot of fragile masculinity in there, because if you're gonna subjugate and dominate women, there's a certain level of, I think, fragile masculinity that at play that makes you feel like you have to do that. And if you're that kind of person, kissing guys ain't gonna be your lane. So of course he's gonna dip out. But he goes back home, and that's where we meet Onias. He's got the braided beard. And he's got a basement full of motherfuckers writing down everything he says, like he's his revelations and whatever into these pamphlets, and they're gonna send these warnings to the church that are essentially like, look, we need to get back to multiple women, we need to get back to casual racism. I don't know what the fuck y'all up to, but this is what we need to do. Ron's not sold, but then him and Onias go to this dream mine, and Ron really Onias just kind of shines him up, like, about how he's probably the one. And the one is going to help them build a city of refuge for the end of days or whatever. And the city of refuge is just a place where they can, like, fuck as many women as they want and, whatever. A place where we could do all the shit that we know we're not supposed to do, but we're pretending it's religious so we can do it anyway. Like, a place for them to do that, on their own. And I love how when Ron, now bearded, at the end of the episode, is reading this... essentially this threat letter that he's written for Diana, when he's reading it, and this is the same threatening letter we heard about earlier. when he's reading this letter, they all take a vote. Who all thinks that was the word of God? And that's how they choose Ron. That's how they convince Ron that he's the one, is by a majority vote of like 10 people. Stupid. Oh, man. So, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna start saying mean things. So wrapping up with a couple of thoughts. I already talked about this. The scene where Bill Tough talks to Mom and she asks Jeb to leave, and he's like, he doesn't give a fuck. I think it's amazing that entering the final episode, this show is still introducing new characters. I hated that. I hate that in general. Like, why do we keep getting new characters? But at this point, it's kind of funny to me, and it's not really hurting the show. But this Chip and Ricky that the mother mentions, we're going to have to meet them at some point as well. But I think it's funny that the way this show is structured, if I do have to offer a flaw, the fact that all of the information we get is via word of mouth. It makes it a little tough to follow because I keep finding myself wondering, like, how would so-and-so know about this? And then usually I can go, okay, well, like anything that Bernard, what's his last name? Brian? Like, now it's like bothering me that I can't remember this guy's name. Bernard. I got it in here somewhere. Fuck. That's really bothering me. Like, I can't remember this guy's name, and now I can't find it in my notes. And you guys know who I'm talking about. I don't even need to fucking find the name that badly, but it's just like Bernard Brady. Okay. I almost forgot my point. But, everything that we hear from Bernard Brady, you might be like, okay, well, how would Bernard know that? But we established earlier that everything that he says, he heard from Ron. Ron told him directly. So it's like you find these situations where you're like, okay, wait, how would so-and-so know that? And I think that makes the show a little bit tougher to follow when we're not just seeing events playing out. We know we started with the end, and now we're seeing how we got there via word of mouth, essentially. And I think what's interesting about that too is that I look at that as like, that makes it a little harder to follow. But also at the same time, that's the reality of how this is what would happen. You would start with the crime. And then if you're the cop, that is, you would start with the crime, and then you'd have to go, okay, how did we get here? And you're interviewing people. What happened? Did you see anything? Do you know anybody here? Do you know this guy? Does he have this motive? Like all of these things. And that's how it happens in real life. So it's like, if I had to pick a flaw, it would be that. But even then, you could look at it as a pro in that this show is brave enough to show things in a way that's identical to how they would really happen. If you were really Jeb Pyrie, you would be interviewing Bernard Brady and he would be telling you what Ron Lafferty told him. You would be interviewing Alan and he would be telling you what Brenda said to him or what he overheard his brother say. You would get these letters and you would find out from, this is what Brenda was going through because she wrote in a letter to her sister. And I think that that's an interesting aspect of the show. That's a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, the bravery of introducing new characters in the final episode is just wild to me. I'm like, there's so many characters. Like, I was already struggling with just the Lafferty brothers and their wives for like 3 or 4 episodes. I'm just now getting that. And then they introduce Onias. They introduce, they're going to introduce this Chip and Ricky. There's other people I'm sure they've introduced along the way. But yeah, that's wild to me. I love the shot of Brenda crying when she's being prayed over. It's like a shot from the side, and she's crying, and there's like a pile of hands of people praying over her. I love that shot. Bill refusing backup when he's going to the mines to find Onias. He signed his death warrant with that, right? Like, he's gonna die in the finale because he didn't ask for backup, right? Like, we're all in agreement on that, right? I'm just saying. And then, lastly, I noticed a mistake in that the editors must have missed. In the scene where Matilda is offering her not thinly veiled death threat to Brenda, in the background, the car that she got out of is parked right in the front of the house. At the beginning, for some reason the passenger door is open. And the only reason I noticed that is because it made me, when I saw it, it made me think like, oh, did one of the men drive her up here to like, yo, we're about to drive up here. We're about to threaten Brenda. So, get in the car. Let's go. And she got out and left the car open to deliver this threat. But then as the scene continues, the door is closed. And then when she goes to leave, she gets it to the driver's side. So for whatever reason, the editors missed this open car door in the background, but I caught it. So wrapping this one up, it did end up long like I thought it was going to be. But like I said, I love this episode. I hope you guys had some interesting revelations that you want to put in the comments as well. And I'll see you guys next week for the finale. Peace.